Chapter 22. Clara. Clara caught Mason's eye as they got off the shuttle back at the tornado complex. It was late, and the team had grabbed dinner on the way, but she still felt the need to talk to him. After the coerced lunch date with Joel, she had decided it was time to tell Mason everything. It might ruin their chances of a future relationship, but at least she would feel better knowing he knew the truth. So, dinner didn't work out, but do you still feel like hearing what I have to say? She asked as she slowed her step to match his slower pace. Of course, he said with a slight grin. I've been on pins and needles all day. Clara swatted his arm. While she had no doubt he was curious as to what she had alluded to, his response was grossly exaggerated. I'm sure you have. Did someone drive you here? I certainly didn't drive myself, he said, pointing down at his booted ankle. He was still on the crutches, though she had seen him place a little weight on the foot throughout the day. Duke dropped me off. Well, how about I drive you home and we can talk there? Lead the way, he said, motioning with his arm. Clara tried to formulate the words in her head as she drove, but nothing sounded right. They were still a jumbled mess when she pulled into Mason's driveway, and she had no idea how he was going to react. After helping him out of the car, she followed him up the entrance and into his house. Living room? Mason asked as he shut the door behind them. Sure, that will be fine. Clara took a deep breath as she sat on the couch. She stared down at her hands, collecting her thoughts before glancing up at Mason. So, I haven't been completely honest with you. His brow lifted as he cocked his head at her. Okay, what haven't you been honest about? About why we broke up back in high school. Mason leaned forward, an intensity flowing from his eyes. I knew it. Your father was involved, wasn't he? Clara bit her lip and nodded. He was, but so were yours. What? Disbelief colored his voice and his expression. My father didn't think you were good enough for me. To be honest, I don't think he ever thought you'd become a pro player. I'd love for him to see you now. She shook her head to rein in her train of thought. Anyway, he reached out to your parents with his concerns. Evidently, they had some about me. They thought I would distract you and keep you from making pro. So they came up with an agreement. What agreement? Mason's voice was ice cold. He offered to pay for your college if we broke up. She paused and took another breath. They accepted, and he brought the offer to me. I didn't want to take it, Mason, but I knew college was important for you. You needed to be on a college team to get discovered by the draft. I also knew your parents couldn't really afford to send both you and Duke at the same time. I know it was wrong, but I thought I was doing the best thing I could for you. The best thing for me? Mason's eyes grew to the size of quarters as his voice rose in pitch. How was that the best thing for me? You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara. I thought I was going to marry you, and I've struggled to have a real relationship since because I never understood what went wrong. She blinked at him, trying to make sense of his words. He'd thrown a lot at her, but only a few were sticking in her mind. Wait, you were going to marry me? Mason scoffed and shook his head. Yeah, I had a ring picked out and everything. Tears filled Clara's eyes. He had loved her as much as she had loved him, and she had messed it up. How could she have been so stupid to listen to her father? Mason, I'm so sorry. Me too, he said with a sigh, and then ran his hand through his hair. Do you think... The words stuck in her throat. Do you think we can get past this and try again? I may have let you go, but I never stopped loving you. Mason's jaw clenched, and his hand slid down his cheek. I don't know, Clara. Why did you decide to tell me this now anyway? A mirthless chuckle escaped Clara's mouth. She might as well tell him everything. Go big or go home, right? My father called me on Tuesday when you went to your appointment without me. He invited me to lunch. Only when I got there, he had invited this guy Joel I was seeing before I took the job here. Mason's brow furrowed, and she knew he was about to ask what this had to do with anything, so she hurried on. I didn't care for Joel. I was dating him because my father pushed us together. But when he blindsided me like that, I realized he was never going to let me live my life if I didn't stand up to him. And did you? Stand up to him? Clara's mind flashed back to the encounter. Though not her finest hour, she had definitely stood up to him. I did. I think you would have been proud of me. He wasn't pleased, but I told Joel I wasn't interested in him, and then I told my father to stop running my life. When I left the restaurant, I felt like I was on cloud 9, like I could do anything. Still, this dark spot hung over me, the past between us. As much as I was afraid it might drive you away, I knew I needed to tell you the whole truth. I'm glad you finally did, Mason said, and he sounded sincere, but Clara wanted more than his forgiveness. She wanted to know if their future had a chance. And I know you want to know if this means we can have a chance again, but this is a lot to take in. I need a little processing time. Of course, I'm sorry. It wasn't what she wanted to hear, but she could understand his feelings. She had just dropped quite the bomb on him. She grabbed her purse and stood. I guess I'll see you later? Yeah, later. His tone was non-committal and cold, and it broke Clara's heart. She had suspected he would be angry with her, but she had hoped he would understand the position she had been placed in and forgive her. Perhaps she shouldn't have told him. She could have taken the secret to her grave. No, she shook her head. If she wanted a chance at a real relationship with him, then she had to be honest. Otherwise, her father probably would have told him at some inopportune moment and ruined everything anyway. It was better this way, even if he never forgave her. A tear slid down her cheek as she climbed into her car. She'd been so certain he would be happy he'd been right all these years, that he would take her in his arms and rekindle their relationship with a searing kiss. But she should have known better. Things never worked out that nicely for her. Now she had pushed her father away, and possibly Mason too. Could this night get any worse? She backed out of his driveway and wiped a tear with her hand. How was she going to continue working with him if he didn't forgive her? He would have to. She had felt such peace that telling him was the right thing that she couldn't believe God would have steered her wrong. He just needed time, like he said. Clara sniffed back another tear as the sign for the interstate appeared. Normally, she would avoid the interstate, but at this time of night, the traffic would be light, and she would probably get home quicker. She was fairly certain a tub of half-eaten ice cream would be waiting for her in her freezer, so she could drown out her sorrows with its creamy goodness. She signaled her turn onto the interstate and then glanced over her shoulder to make sure she was free to merge. The sound of horns registered moments before the bright lights. Clara turned just in time to see a truck going the wrong way slam into the front of her car. There was a loud pop, and then the world went dark.